I sometimes have a guilty pleasure of wasting time on Reddit. And there's often these ask Reddit questions or relationship advice. And frequently the question is posed, people that have been together for a really long time, what's your secret? Or what's the secret to a happy marriage or whatever? And I always like to click on them to see what people say. And it's always around the same thing. Well, you have to communicate and you have to respect each other and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, why does nobody ever say you should stay fit? Like, you rarely see anybody list that as a quality that improves their marriage. And I really feel strongly that it does.
Yeah.
And for many reasons. Exercise is one of the best avenues for stress management. Oh, yeah. So if you have a good outlet for your stressful job or your kids or whatever, and you're channeling it into exercise, you're way less likely to be an asshole to your partner.
Yeah. Or your kids or your kids, just your family in general.
Whatever.
Yeah.
And then if you're making time for yourself, right? So you just feel like mentally better, but physically better as well. And you don't feel left out or neglected or nobody cares because you're taking the time to care for yourself first. It allows you to show up better and more present and with more to give to your family and your partner and that kind of stuff too.
Yeah. I think it's not like we've been together forever. There's certainly couples that have been together for a lot longer than we have, but I would say like quality wise, we have a very, very high level thing going. And often I think it's like those questions are weird in that you say how, like people that have been together forever, it's like, well, you might be together for a really long time, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's still a good thing. And you like each other and you're like best friends. There's so many of those people out there with the sitcom humor thing of the old ball and chain. And they're like, they're in it because they're in it, but that's the only reason. So
yeah, I legitimately like you.
Yeah, I like you a lot too.
Thanks.
I'm going to stick around.
Yeah, me too. We got a good thing going.
I think that part of avoiding complacency in a relationship is putting effort in many different avenues, but like your physical being is a major one of those things. Like you said, stress management is huge. Doing things together, right?
Yeah.
Like often couples have their little separate lives and so-and-so goes and does a book club and whatever guy goes and bowls or whatever it is. This is the second time I brought up bowling and I don't know why I keep going to bowling on this podcast. It's like a very
Homer Simpson dad thing that you think of like the man in the relationship.
It's still the 1980s, right? People still go bowling.
I mean, they still exist.
For sure. But anyways, so the guy does his thing and the girl does their thing, and they often don't have a lot of things together. And we have got so many different couples in our gym that like, even if they can't work out together, they can still go and do the workout individually, but then they get to talk about it later. And it's something that they share, a passion or a hobby that they share. You and I love working out together. We try to do it as much as we can because it's just a thing that we can do that makes us feel better and it brings us closer together.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite ways to spend time with you, but I also respect couples that like don't do CrossFit together and they each have their separate interests and that's healthy for them to have their social circles outside of each other. We're so enmeshed and codependent on each other. People are probably like, God, how do you guys even do it? So I think it can work both ways, but I think things are just healthier when you're looking after your fitness in one way or another. It can be a common activity. I know some couples that do separate fitness activities, but they play a sport together. They golf together, or they play pickleball together, or whatever. So there's lots of ways to make it happen. Sometimes you see these relationship advice things about, they call it like dead bedrooms, where the sex life of the couple has just completely died. And often in there, people are like, oh, it started when I started taking antidepressants because a very common side effect of those is loss of sexual function. And so I feel like that too, that exercise is so good for your mental health. And then also if you can eat better, that's like the primary way to turn things around with generalized anxiety and depression, that if you can avoid needing to take the medication, that can save the sexual side of your relationship if it's really just the medication causing those issues. So, and then also staying fit and staying in good shape. I don't think there's anything wrong with just like, hey, it's pretty fun to be attracted to your spouse.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nothing wrong with wanting to stay hot for each other.
I know. As far as the like sex side goes, it's not even necessarily always just a like hormonal thing or a physical thing. It's sometimes there's just that like actual level of attraction that's missing. You kind of like get complacent with each other and you stop putting effort in and you like go 20 years without seeing a gym and you're eating like crap and both of you are just declining slowly. And it's hard to get excited about that when you remember what it used to be like. I think there's something to be said about A, putting in work for your partner, but then B, knowing that your partner is putting in work for you. And it's a motivating thing so that you're more likely to do it for yourself, for them. And it's just like this give and take thing. And then you just end up staying hot for each other. And that's great.
I think too, CrossFit specifically outside of other physical activities really teaches you, there's like a mental adaptation to CrossFit. The primary change happens between the ears, where you just get better at facing hard things.
Yeah.
And that starts to trickle through into your life, right? Oh, whatever that conversation is that you've been avoiding, or that thing in the kitchen you needed to clean up, that mess that just gets left and then your partner's annoyed. Just like all these little things, you just start to get better at handling and just doing the harder thing. Because you sort of learn that almost everything is worse in anticipation of it. And once you actually just do it and get through it, you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. Or, oh, I didn't die.
Yeah.
Is that from The Hangover? Like, did you die? You have something you're holding on to that you want to talk to your spouse about, but you're afraid or scared it's going to be a fight. It's almost always better if you just like say it and communicate properly and talk it out than if you hold on to it until you freak out on each other about something. So I think CrossFit specifically teaches you to just handle those harder things before they become major problems.
Yeah.
So.
And a serious major problem that happens with long-term couples is like when you get to the point where you have to take care of the other person. And if you can delay that for as long as possible by taking care of yourself earlier on, that's going to be a much better situation. We're going to get to the point where I'm 5 years older than you. So chances are I'm going to age before you age, right? So there's a point where all of a sudden things are on the decline and things are getting worse. And now you're taking care of another person. And if you can push that 10 or 15 or 20 years into the future, that's so much better for both people.
Yeah.
So
I want more good years with you.
Yeah, for sure. You don't want to get to the point where you're like, it's this sad situation where it's a burden, right? And nobody wants to feel like they are a burden, and nobody wants to have to worry about being burdened with somebody else. So as much as couples are like, we're in it to death, let's delay that negative time as long as possible.
In sickness and in health. Let's try to have more health than sickness. Yeah. Till death do us part. Yeah. At one point I was asking people, my question of the day was like, why do you do CrossFit? And you get all these really great, inspiring answers. And lots of people, it's to keep up with my kids. And my answer was yes, to keep up with my kids now. But more importantly is I don't want to be a burden on my kids in the future.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. I don't want to be a burden on you, but you're older than me. So it would probably be them like after me. Yeah. Where it's like when my kids are my age, like 40, I want them to be out in the world and playing with their kids and doing their job and crushing whatever their interests are in life. I don't want them to have to be spending half their time being like, oh, I got to go help mom get groceries because she can't carry the groceries up the stairs anymore. It's like, that's my job now, is to make sure that I'm not a burden to those kids like 30 years from now. Yeah. And I can easily do that by just showing up and doing fitness with my friends, working out with my best friend.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. As we're all sort of like aging up in the gym, growing old together, I had this thought the other day that the longer we do this and the more we'll cross 40 and then 50 and then whatever, it's like we had this theoretical idea that this would all work out. And now you're like, oh, told you so. As people get older and they're still really fit and they're still really involved in their own life and their kids' lives and then their grandkids' lives and everything. And I was like, yeah, I was quite confident that this would all work out, and it's all playing out maybe even better than anticipated.